This is Greg Bufithis, the founder and chairman of Project Council. I'm here at the Langham Hotel in London, and we're covering the Georgetown Law Center presentation, Corporate Counsel Europe. It's the first time that Georgetown has taken the Corporate Counsel Institute, which they've been running for 14 years, out of the United States, and they're testing it here in London. I have with me this afternoon John Buchanan, who's a research associate at the University of Cambridge, who just led a panel discussion. And John, we really didn't get a chance at the panel to talk about your specialty, which is Japan. We'd like to talk about that. One of the things that you've said very often is that Japan demonstrates that corporate governance is driven by much more than law. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I think that Japan is in a way a kind of test case where legal systems that are similar to, for example, North America or Europe or other countries have produced a rather different result, simply because the practices that underpin them are different. I think that one good example of this is that in Japan there have been various legal changes. There have been formal changes over the last few years with the avowed intent of changing the system. The system outwardly has changed, but the way that people conduct corporate governance, the way people run companies, has not really changed very much. I've been doing research with colleagues that has looked into how companies are actually run, and it's very interesting to see how an outwardly different format introduced relatively recently has often produced almost no change whatsoever. People continue to do the same things in slightly different ways, but producing the same results. I think one big thing about the Japanese system as a whole, at least in the post-war era, because many people talk about Japan having traditional corporate governance. Traditional in Japan really means post-war. What developed there was what is often called the community firm, where people looked to the company as the focus of their lives. This doesn't mean that everyone in Japan is focusing their lives on a single company. It means that certain major companies give this kind of position to their full-time employees. There's a big distinction between full-time employees and part-time employees. So we're talking about a rather select group of people, if you like, the big companies and their full-timers. The companies offer these people stable employment, and there is a relationship of trust between the two groups. People tend to stay in these big companies for all their working lives.
So what you're saying, I think, is that there's a focus on the firm as an enduring entity and not really a source of shareholder value. Is that correct?
It is, because if you work in a company for your whole life, you take a natural interest in promoting it, in making it continue. You don't think of it as something that the shareholders have a right to take money out of. Legally they do. The Japanese law is no different. But in practice they are not permitted to do so. And permitted is perhaps the wrong word. The emphasis, the way that companies are conducted, does not encourage shareholders to take out excessive remuneration. Now, the other thing I would say about Japanese companies is that because they tend to be internal, because the labour force is fairly stable, you have a situation where right up to board level you have people gradually progressing, so that the board is very much the executive committee. It's not a separate thing. In the UK especially, you talk about the board and management. In Japan they are the same thing.
So what does this mean in practice? Are we talking about a good system, or are we talking about a bad system?
It produces both, unfortunately. Very often it produces a good system in the sense that you've got dedicated employees who genuinely believe in the future of their company. Many of the so-called agency problems don't exist, for the simple reason that if you've got people you've been working with for 20, 30 years all round you, you're not going to try and do things like divert assets for your personal gratification. For example, pay multiples between the lowest paid and the highest paid in Japanese companies are traditionally relatively small. For the simple reason that if you know these people, you don't want to be seen to be earning disproportionately more than they do. So there are some very good sides to it. The bad side is that if you're stuck with the same bunch of people in the same company, you can get complacent, you can get inward looking. And what sometimes happens is that some of these companies are so focused on the enduring firm, as it were, that they forget about the financial aspects. So there are both pros and cons. But the interesting thing is that many of the agency-style problems simply don't exist in a big way in Japan. They're not allowed to exist, not because they're blocked by the kind of countermeasures you would expect to see in the USA or the UK or other countries. It's that they don't arise in the first place. So I think Japan has something to tell us in that respect.
John, I know you have a very busy schedule. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to chat with us.
No, it's been a pleasure.
This is Greg Bufidis, Chairman and Founder of Project Council, here at the Georgetown Conference at the Langham Hotel in London.